I think ultimately, as a freelancer, and even if you're not freelance, I think you've got to try and build the work life that is the best possible one for you. We spend a lot of our time working, so why not try and make that really good? And that doesn't have to be traveling around everywhere. It could literally be working from your own office, where you set your own time and you work with the clients that really speak to you and your sort of values.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey, welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to be back. This is episode 21 of the podcast. We're on a little bit of a break, but now we're back. We're going to be doing bi-weekly episodes from now on a Tuesday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get all the episodes onto your device that you use. I'm super excited to be back. We've got loads of great stuff coming up for you, so I can't wait to get into these episodes. I just wanted to give you a quick note. We will be releasing the freelance contract bundle in October. So if you want to hear more about that and you want to get a contract template made especially for motion designers for your business, then head over to motionhatch.com/contract. If you sign up there, you'll be notified when we're going to launch it. It's going to be really great. We're going to have lots of bonuses and stuff on launch week, you know, some Q&As with lawyers, things like that. So I highly recommend that you sign up so you can be notified about them. It's going to be really cool and it's going to be very informative. So please head on over there to motionhatch.com/contract to find out about that. So on this week's episode, we're talking to Tom Davis. He is a motion designer from Manchester, and he is also the founder of Loop, which is a website that has lots of resources for motion designers. So you can find that at madebyloop.co.uk. I highly recommend that you check it out. He's got loads of cool stuff up there as well. So on the podcast, we spoke a lot about remote working because Tom actually did some remote working for a while in Croatia, and he actually was in Berlin as well for a little while working. So we talked about how to help convince your clients to allow you to work remotely. And we also talked about how to build a business that can be satisfying on a personal level as well. He gave us some cool tips around that. One of them involves donating a percentage of his profit to a charity. So I really like that idea. So please do stick around and listen to this episode. If you haven't yet, please do hit the subscribe button. Let's get into it. Hey Tom, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Cool. So I just wanted to kind of jump right in and ask you about what you do. From the look of your website, it seems like you've got a ton of things going on. You do like motion design work, voiceover work. You've got a blog on your portfolio site. You've also got Made by Loop, which is tools and resources for motion designers. Is that kind of intentional from a business point of view, or do you just like keep them busy?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, the nature of sort of freelance work is that I find is that you'll kind of have peaks and troughs of being busy. So the Made by Loop stuff is basically what I do in my sort of downtime. If I'm between projects, I'll kind of think of my own sort of what I would find useful and try and make a product for Loop. And that sort of keeps me busy on that side of things. And then the blog is, I actually used to do website design as well. I used to post like tips and tricks there. And if I ever find something that I want to write about, I'll just stick it on the blog and hopefully others find it useful. Or, you know, it could be something that helps towards SEO for motion design, and that sort of pushes my portfolio up. So it's mainly just trying to keep busy, I think, but kind of helps the business side of things as well.
Yeah. So do you think having a blog on your website, you think that does help with kind of SEO and maybe getting some clients through that way? Or do you think is it more helping other motion designers, or a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. Usually I'll always try and write an article that I think others will find useful, because ultimately I think that's what people are looking for. You know, you can very easily tell if something is written for SEO purposes as opposed to actually being written for other people. So I try and keep the articles directly towards sort of motion designers, but also potential clients who might not be in the motion design world and they want to know a bit more about it. And I think that helps. even just to be able to point clients to a blog post and say, this is why we do things this way. I think that helps.
Yeah, definitely like a bit of client education almost. And I don't know whether we should say this, but just in case anyone doesn't know, SEO is like search engine optimization. So you're basically writing stuff where you put different keywords in your blog or whatever to make it appear in searches. I just thought, I don't know, like how much the audience knows about that.
Yeah.
I don't like to take anything for granted.
Yeah, definitely. That's the web background sort of coming in. It's just something I've always done, to be honest. I've always sort of written things online, and I go through phases, to be honest, of writing posts, because it is quite time consuming. And like I say, I want to have something that people want to read.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good thing, like the kind of everyone's sharing stuff now in the motion design industry. And I really like that side of it. Like, that's why I'm doing this podcast, just to try and share more information and, maybe get some voices on that haven't been heard as much. And I think it's a really nice idea to have a blog on your website. I'm not sure whether like tons of people do or not, because like you say, it is quite time consuming.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, maybe they're not sure of what they would say, or they feel that they have to write in a particular way as well. And for me, I just kind of write how I would, if I was telling you, for example, how to do something or about a particular process, that's how I'd try and write the blog post as well. It can even just be an update as to what's been going on. So I did some posts about working and traveling and the people that I'd met around there, and the sort of freelance side of things as well. So what tools I use. I'll probably write one about the podcast as well.
Oh, yeah. It's good to kind of catch people up on what you're doing, really. Yeah, I just wanted to cover a bit about Made by Loop as well. So do you want to just explain what that is and kind of who it's for and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, the whole idea with Made by Loop was to keep myself busy between client projects. And I thought if I could create products that other motion designers would use and find useful, then that's a great thing to do. But also it gives me the chance to create my own projects and create the type of projects that I want to do more of. So I created a sci-fi user interface, like futuristic user interface pack. And I created a little trailer for that. And that is work that I've always wanted to do. But, I might not have that opportunity. That opportunity might not be coming along to me directly. So by creating it myself, I've given myself the opportunity to create this sort of perfect project for me. And it was great because I put the trailer out there, and even if the pack is available to buy, but also that trailer brought in a client project because a client saw that and said, wow, that's cool. I want something like that for me. And it sort of opened that sort of door as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, I think, because you're kind of creating your own products and then you're making trailers for them. And then that makes it easier for clients to see how you have that skill as well of like coming up with the ideas for what would be in the motion design piece and stuff like that to sell something. Like, I just think that's quite an interesting idea. You're sort of doing both sides of it and then potentially having like sort of like a mini side business that's bringing you in like a little bit of income as well to kind of help with when the peaks and troughs of freelance.
Yeah, it's the thinking behind it really was to create people call it a passive income. But for me, it was more about creating products that people would find useful. So you've got the sort of futuristic UI packs. I've got quite a few scripts on there now. And what I found is that it's kind of morphing into sort of a site that I really like working on. And it gives me the avenues to explore, like I say, like my sort of perfect project or creating scripts. I'd never created a script for After Effects before. And that kind of brought back the whole sort of website development aspect of it as well, because it uses JavaScript and it kind of combined the sort of worlds that I've always kind of known to create something that hopefully other designers will find useful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You're sort of using your past experiences and bringing it into motion design and then creating something different out of it that you're interested in and something that hopefully helps other people too. So yeah, it's really cool. Nice. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes as well because there's loads of useful stuff on there for everyone, so
Cool.
they can go and find it. As well, I was looking on your website and I thought it was really cool that you donate 2% of every project over £1,000 to World Lands Trust. Do you want to tell me a bit about that and what made you make that decision?
Yeah, so it came on the back of I'd watched a load of documentaries on Netflix. There's some fantastic ones like A Plastic Ocean, Chasing Coral, Chasing Ice, very much focused on climate change and the impact that we're having on the world. And it sort of really made me think about the work that I'm doing. And I sort of looked long and hard at the sort of clients that I was working with and who I wanted to work with. And ultimately I thought, well, some people would go off and only do sort of charity work. But for me, I wanted to sort of try and do something within my work immediately to try and help give something back. And so it is really spurred on by that to donate a particular percentage to the World Land Trust. And basically what that will do is they buy and protect an acre of land for every £100 donated. So at the end of each project, it's quite good that when the final sort of check clears, I can take 2% of that, create a certificate for the client that says, as an extra thank you for working with me, I've donated on your behalf to the World Land Trust, and you've saved X amount of acres of critically endangered habitat around the world. Yeah, just sort of my way of giving back and something nice for the client at the end of the project as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice idea. I don't know, like, anyone else who's doing that really. It made me think that I should do something like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do that. Like you said, you always think about we should work more for charities, we should use our design skills for good and things like that, which I definitely agree with and think that we should do that. But I never really thought of like, oh, I'm getting paid to do this job. Maybe I could just use that as a way to give back a bit and give it a little bit of a percentage to a charity or something like that. I think it's a really nice way of doing things. And I like that you give your client like a little certificate too. I think that's really nice.
Yeah, definitely. It was actually a friend of mine, Katie, she went freelance and she mentioned a different sort of charity where I think it's you pledge a certain amount from your salary and it'll go to a good cause. It is great at the end of the project to be able to kind of show the client, yes, you've created this video, but you've also sort of helped protect this habitat. Yeah, it's been good so far. I started it as a little test and then it sort of grew from there and it's been really sort of well received. So yeah. Someone said to me the other day, they said 2% is quite a lot. And I actually sort of battled for a while as to what the percentage should be. And it's kind of tricky because sometimes, you always think you can potentially do more, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But do you think that sort of makes clients think like, oh yeah, Tom's really nice, we should work with him again, like taking it from the business side of things as well, like we like to do on this podcast. But, because I think it can be like it's like a double-sided thing, isn't it? Not that you should only give to charities so that you can get more work, but I was just wondering like what the response had been from the clients as well.
I think ultimately being freelance, when a business sort of takes you on, they're kind of making an investment in you. So if you are, say, donating a percentage, that's sort of who I am. And if that adds to my sort of, a plus point on my side of things, then power to it. Ultimately, as long as the trees are protected and we do that sort of good work as an aside, that's the best thing possible, really. But it is quite nice to have something at the end of a project to say, as an extra little thank you and the certificate. And it's some clients don't read that bit on my website and it'll come out of the blue, which has been quite fun.
Yeah, I think it's just like a really cool idea. So I wanted to dive into that a bit. And I think one thing you said was interesting, that it's kind of, part of who you are. And I think that's a really important thing to think about when you're freelancers. It's always that thing of trying to put more of yourself in your work, or that's why people write blogs and stuff like that, because they want to show themselves a bit more. And I guess it's kind of can be a way to stand out as well. Not that that's why you're donating to the charity, but I mean, just putting more of yourself into your work and into your website, I think that's really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Alongside this, there was a big sort of, I spent a lot of time thinking about the work that I was doing. And it was kind of not in a bit of a funk, but I was just kind of, thinking, oh, I make stuff move. I animate things to sell products for a lot of clients, and is this something that I, want to be remembered for? Is this actually worthwhile? And it was kind of on the back of that and reading about sort of ethics in design as well, and the sort of, clients that you are working with. And it was kind of a culmination of things as well. So that was sort of decisive action for me to then take, that I could then say, try and do something good. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think about those things a lot too, like how much are you giving back? And if you're working for advertising agencies and sometimes things like that, you can feel a bit like, oh, we're just like selling products,
Yeah.
But I think that one thing, you can do small things like what you're doing, and also you can kind of direct more to clients that align more with your values and things like that. I think I spoke a bit about that on the podcast before myself, like trying to have more clients that are kind of having a positive impact on the world and things like that. So I just think it's a nice thing to talk about, because it's not generally something that we do talk about. And also it's nice to think about, how we can have a positive impact on the world as motion designers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. What I would say as well is that if you are a limited company, you can set yourself up as sort of a sponsor. You can nominate a charity as a sponsor, and there's actual sort of avenues you can take with HMRC to kind of set that up in an official way. So that's, if anyone listening to this is thinking of that, then definitely check that out as well. And usually talk to, if you have a charity in mind, usually talk to them, because chances are bigger businesses will have this in place.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know about that. So that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing it. I wanted to talk a bit about the fact that you kind of went traveling for a bit, but you were also working. You were kind of traveling and working around Europe. And I just wanted to know what inspired you to do that.
Yeah, so it kind of came about because I was on the plane back from Seville, and I'd had a great time out there. It was like really sunny, and I was flying back into London, and it was really grey and miserable. And I thought, all I could think was, it was kind of like the post sort of holiday blues. I was like, why do I have to come back here? Why do I have to go to work? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to go back to work on Monday? And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, why do I have to be here? The vast majority of the work that I was doing at the time was remote. I actually have an office I share with a friend of mine, and I work from there as a base. But day-to-day sort of client work is predominantly remote based. So I thought, well, why don't I try doing my work and taking my work with me to somewhere else? So I decided to try it and chose Berlin for a week, because Berlin has quite a big sort of tech scene. And I thought, if I can do it there, then I can do it anywhere. Or that would be the best sort of space to work from. I think I actually thought, if I can work from a coffee shop in Manchester, why can't I work from a coffee shop in Berlin? So went out there for a week, and arguably I was more productive in Berlin than I was at home. So that sort of kicked off, traveling around to sort of different places to not only give the remote working a try, but also to sort of travel as well. Because I'd never really traveled before, Seville. The furthest I'd flown to, I think, was Ireland, which from Manchester is not very far at all.
Yeah, that surprised me when you told me that. I was like, oh my God, really? Like, you were like, oh yeah, so I just went to Ireland before that, but then I went on one holiday and then just decided that I was going to go and do more traveling and work at the same time. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, exactly. It's the thing is, when I went freelance, I put so much effort into going freelance that I kind of was just 100% work. And what it meant was that I hadn't taken a break in a couple of years whilst I was finding my footing. So this was a sort of intermediate stop, really. I could go to somewhere new, try somewhere new, and yet also not feel guilty about taking time off at the same time, which now I've realized is actually a good thing if you do take time off. So yeah, it kind of kickstarted that from, I sort of, to put it in a cliche, I got the travel bug and wanted to try and visit as many places as possible whilst also working at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit, I don't know if it's like a cliche or like a bit of a buzzy to say like, oh, people are like digital nomads and stuff like that. I just wondered like how you felt about that and if you like consider yourself a digital nomad, or at that time, would you consider yourself a digital nomad?
So this is the thing. I went to Berlin for a week and then I did Lisbon, and both those times I was just doing it on my own. I had no idea about this whole sort of community of people, or digital nomads, if you like. And I ended up in Budapest with a group of 16 other freelancers. It was a group called Nomad House. And the idea was that everyone was co living and co working, sort of living in the 16 people, I think it was, living in the same space. And yeah, just sort of exploring the city. And at that point, I sort of discovered the community of digital nomads. And these people, I was just going for a couple of weeks at a time to different places. And some of the guys there were, constantly on the road, just traveling 365 days a year. So it was fascinating to sort of discover that community. But I don't think I ever really called myself sort of a digital nomad, or I never felt like that was sort of a definition that I could adhere to, because there were people in that extreme where they were just constantly traveling. For me, it was like just working from different places. Yeah, it was an interesting one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I have like a bit of a, not a struggle with that word, but when you don't travel every day out of the year, but then you do travel sometimes and work, I feel like location independent kind of resonates a little bit with me more on that side of things, instead of, I say like, oh yeah, I want to be location independent. I want to be able to live and work from anywhere. And I think that kind of resonates a little bit more with me than the term digital nomad, because I think also it's become a bit of like sort of a buzzword. And I just wanted to bring it up because there is a big community around that. And I thought if people want to get into traveling and working more, it's definitely something to tap into and like find these groups like Nomad House. And, there's like a million Facebook groups, and I'm part of a community called Location Indie who focus on building businesses around location independence and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring that up to kind of help people if they are kind of thinking about doing more working and traveling and things like that. I think it's, it's good because you can search for those people, right? Those groups around the world.
Yeah, definitely. I think location independence is definitely the better term for it. I think with digital nomads, there's sort of, it's almost like the Instagram version of it. So it's like people look and it's the perfect lifestyle, traveling around, and the gritty truth of it is it's not like that. Yeah, it's fun, but there are sort of harsh times as well. I do think the groups are quite a good way to sort of dip your toe in the water and just give it a try. Especially if you're not sort of confident doing things on your own, or you'd have no idea where to start. You're essentially joining a community of people that are already doing that sort of thing. And even just having just someone to go to dinner with or get breakfast with or explore a city, that is really helpful, to be honest. So I'd say anyone sort of wanting to give it a try, definitely check out some of the groups, because it was definitely fun. And also it's kind of like networking. I mean, I've had a project with two of the people from Budapest in the Nomad House group, because chances are you'll meet other people that are, web designers or building products, and they may need a motion design video. So that's where you can kind of bring your skills into the game.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because a lot of people say that, it's like a struggle to get remote work and things like that. And I was thinking a lot about that recently is, if you're meeting people from other countries and you're exploring more things around location independence and people who are digital nomads and stuff like that, if they become your clients, they're not going to want you to be in an office, you know what I mean? So I think like that's a really another good reason to kind of look into these things and meet people all around the world, because then it opens you up more to remote work rather than just networking within your city as well. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It brings people from sort of all walks of business together. And that's really the key, the old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know. If you've got a group of people that are constantly traveling around the world, then they're going to be meeting loads of people as well and say, oh, hang on a minute, I know this, you need a motion design video, you need something to promote your product. I know this guy. So yeah, it's definitely a good aspect of it.
So was there kind of a time where something went wrong because you were working and traveling around?
Honestly, I was quite lucky. Nothing ever really went wrong. I wasn't stranded on an island and the generator cut out. I think that was a story I that was a story I heard once. No, it was I was quite lucky. The work that I had at the time, I think I was working with The Guardian. I'd already done work for them. I was already working remotely, and I literally just said to them, "Look, I'm going to be in Portugal for a couple of weeks. It shouldn't affect anything, but if it does, I'll let you know." And that sort of communication was key to sort of get any of issues out of the way first. The only thing that I came up against was agencies that I'd worked for in the past in Manchester were very keen to have someone on in house, and I just literally had to say, "Look, I'm in the middle of Europe. There's no way I'm going to be on site for 9 o'clock," which was a bit of a shame because a lot of the time I don't think people actually need to be on site. I think agencies are getting better, but there's still sort of a very old school way of thinking in some that everything has to be done on site.
Yeah, definitely. You said that a lot of your clients were already remote. Did you kind of have clients before where you were in house and then you said, now I'm working from my studio or wherever? Or did you kind of seek more remote clients out?
Yeah, it was kind of a mix, really. And it still is to this day, to be honest. What I actually do is I have two day rates. I'll have a remote day rate and an on site day rate. And the on site day rate is just a bit more. So basically, I'll try and price things as a deterrent. So it's a deterrent for me working on site. I'm happy to work on site if I can do it, but it's going to cost the client a bit more. And usually, what I find is that with agencies, they're just a bit nervous to begin with. If you've never worked with them before, chances are they'll want you on site to get a feel for who you are. And that is fine. That's absolutely fine. But then after that, I'll sort of try and gear the relationship towards working more remote, which is usually the process that I take. At the time I was traveling, I was working with The Guardian, as I say, and I was already working remotely for them. It was just a case of letting them know what was going on and yeah, just making sure that if any problems came up, instantly sort of emailed them or got in touch with them. So yeah, it's definitely tricky if you haven't worked with an agency before, because usually they will want you on site. But as soon as they sort of trust you, they know how you work, then they're more sort of receptive to remote work, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wasn't really expecting you to say that you kind of using your rate like as a bit of a deterrent, like you're charging them a bit more if you go in house. I mean, how do you explain that to them?
It's usually because working on site comes with additional costs. So the fact that I work from my own office, I'm paying rent on that office. So obviously I want to make the most of that sort of space. So for me to then go, say, into the centre of Manchester, I've got to get into the centre of Manchester, additional costs, I've got the travel time, all sorts of things. When in actual fact, it's a lot easier for everyone if I can just, my office is round the corner from where I live. So I can just walk round there and I'm instantly on the go to work. So it's the additional costs that sort of justify the higher price, but also it's sort of trying to build a working environment that is sort of more of a futuristic working environment, because we have the ability to work remotely. So why don't we? You know, it's better for everyone. It's better for the environment. There'd be no rush hour as well, if you think, if everyone could sort of work remotely as well. So that's how I sort of justify it to clients, and usually they're all right with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as well, like you've obviously got, if you had more companies that remote, they don't have to pay for an office to sit you in and get you a machine to work on and things like that. So I think that's always a consideration. And like you say, I have my own office as well. So I normally go down there a bit earlier and get started earlier just because it's closer. You get up at the same time, but you're actually working a lot quicker as well. So I think they're definitely interesting things, and I think it is kind of going a bit more in that direction, but I know there is like a bit of pushback. But like you say, if you've kind of been working with people for a while, I think it can be easier to encourage them to let you be more remote. And also with direct to client work, if you're like kind of making an animation for a business that are putting out a product or something, obviously they wouldn't really normally have you in their office too.
Yeah, exactly. I have found that agencies are becoming more receptive. It's literally that sort of trust aspect of it. Usually, if you've been recommended by someone else, that can help because you've got that certain level of trust. It's literally what it comes down to, is that if you're working remotely, they want you to be able to still get the job done, which you obviously need to do.
Yeah. So, do you have any tools that you use in particular when you're dealing with clients that helps with that kind of thing?
The main thing is just sort of being immediately receptive within the day, not sort of leaving emails unanswered for hours on end, and sort of getting that sorted. Things like Google Docs, if I'm writing a script, for example, and I've sent the script over, then the client can comment instantly, and it's almost having me right there if I can see the changes immediately. Usually, if you're working with an agency, you kind of have to deal with what they're using some of the times. But in terms of anything else, like I don't have any specific sort of tools and tricks to do. I think communication is the key. So Slack or Skype, and being able to be contacted is the best thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just like making them feel like you're there for them and things like that, and not being like unavailable when you said you're going to be available and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to bring up a few things that I've heard about that I think is quite interesting. So, a lot of people think, well, I can't travel and work because I can't afford to travel all the time and things like that. But sometimes, obviously, people still have a home base. And I don't know whether you did, but I've also heard of things like trusted house sitters, where you can go to different countries and you basically, the idea is that you go and look after someone's like cat or dog, and then they let you stay in their house for free. And I know a lot of my friends who are location dependent, that's what they do. So they're actually like building businesses and getting clients, but then they're not paying any rent, which I think is really interesting. Have you heard of that before?
That's a great idea. And honestly, it's something that I'll potentially look at in the future. Regarding the cost, like I say, I had the office space that I was renting at the same time, and I had to keep that sort of going. And the thing I would say is that you could potentially just, if you were going to take 2 weeks holiday, for example, you could then potentially turn that into 3 weeks holiday just by taking your laptop with you. So you can sort of book a place. Things like Airbnb make things a lot cheaper. And sometimes living costs in other countries are a lot lower. So things sort of balance out. Sometimes it is more of an expense, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you can go to the beach, and it's a nicer sort of quality of life that you kind of build for yourself. So there's definitely, it's not as expensive as you might think. It just depends how you go about it. You've got to find the best deals. You've got to come up with the inventive solutions like the house sitting sort of idea. And again, check what other people are doing and how other location independent people or digital nomads, how they're doing things, and just have a chat with them to see, you know, what sort of tips and tricks they've got for particular places.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of hubs around different areas as well that, like you say, generally a bit cheaper. Like Thailand's a big one, and you went to Croatia too, right? I've heard that's kind of upcoming in the digital nomad world too, because it's quite cheap, but obviously beaches and quite relaxed place to work.
Yeah, Croatia was a good one actually. That was kind of with another group. One of the guys from the Budapest group actually left halfway through the trip to go to Croatia to meet, I think, his girlfriend at the time. And he was there with another group, Wi-Fi Tribe, and they were doing the same sort of thing, sort of sharing a house, which brings the cost down massively. And yeah, Croatia in itself was really quite cheap and like just a beautiful, beautiful place. And yeah, you kind of you could be in these places and go out and do all the sort of touristy things, which is going to ramp up the cost, or you can try and sort of become a local and shop at the markets and find out what all the locals are doing, and that sort of brings the cost down as well. So
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really interesting way, like kind of living more like a local. You don't have to go to these places and like go to everything and pay like, I don't know, like 20 euros to go and visit all the places, like the touristy stuff. You can just do things like go to the beach when you're not working on the weekend and things like that. Did you find it tough at any point? Because the thing I always think about is generally animation projects are a little bit longer and you have to sit there for more hours than I would think if you were doing like graphic design. Like the projects are generally longer. Did that kind of impact the work you were doing in any way, or did you purposely take on shorter projects?
yeah, I think the focus really for me was how I was spending my time. So in the office here, for example, if I set a render going, I'm kind of not really doing anything because my computer grinds to a halt whilst that render is happening. Whereas when I was in Croatia, I could set a render going and go to the beach and then come back. And it's sort of a nicer set of time. You're still working sort of 8 hours a day. You still have to do that 8 hours, and that 8 hours is the same regardless of whether you're in Croatia or Manchester or London or wherever. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's any more tricky than a graphic designer doing it or a web designer doing it.
Yeah, I just thought because it's intensive to churn stuff out, whereas if you're like doing like lots of different little pieces, I feel like that could be easier to work around to traveling. Like, say, if you're in one place and you have to fly somewhere else one day, then I thought that that might be easier. But I see what you're saying. I think it's just like about planning and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as you plan where you're going to be and accommodate for travel times, then that can really alleviate any of those issues. So in the beginning, I was only going to places for sort of a week at a time, and then I'd be back, and then 2 weeks at a time, and it never really impacted the schedule for me. But definitely, if you're working on shorter projects, you could have sort of 2 days that you do something, and then you've got a couple of days free to go and explore and travel and stuff. So I think it's finding out what works for you, and also yeah, planning everything. I'm quite good on that side of things, so maybe that's why I never had an issue with it.
Yeah, I think as well as it could be like doing a bit more slow travel, like if you had a big project and then you were somewhere for a month and you just stayed in like one country for a month or something like that. That I could see that definitely working more for animators as well.
Yeah, definitely. Just allow yourself the time, and sort of it almost factors into your sort of pitching process as well. So if you know you've got a project that's going to last at least 4 weeks, then maybe look at staying in somewhere for 6 weeks. Give yourself that buffer to work with.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So if there's one piece of advice you'd like the audience to take away from this, what would it be?
I think ultimately, as a freelancer, and even if you're not freelance, I think you've got to try and build the work life that is the best possible one for you. We spend a lot of our time working, so why not try and make that really good? And that doesn't have to be traveling around everywhere. It could literally be working from your own office where you set your own time and you work with the clients that really speak to you, and your sort of values and seeking that out. And there's no set rules here. You can choose to, if you have the option, you can choose the clients that you work with. If a client doesn't pay you for 3 months, then maybe they shouldn't be a client anymore. If a client never likes you working remotely, then does that really work for you? For some people, it might do. For some, it won't. And I think that's the thing that I kind of focus on, is to try and find the people that enable you to work the best possible way. That's what I'm going with. I'm sticking with that answer.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and something that I think about a lot too is, like what you said, there are no rules. And I think it took me like quite a long time to get my head around that. Like, we're all going around kind of saying, oh, but what about this? We should be charging this. We should do that. Everyone works like this way and that way. And really, like, you're building your own freelance business. So you should build it in the way that you want, and you should concentrate on working with the people who share your values and who want to work the same way as you, because basically that means that you're going to do better work and they're going to be happier and you're going to be happier. So I think that's great advice. I think that's a great way to end it.
Cool. Real.
Cool. So where can people find you and your work?
So online, I'm designedbythomas.co.uk, and there's madebyloop.co.uk, and pretty much every social channel, I'm at TE Davis.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Thanks so much again to Tom for coming on the show. That was really awesome. If you head over to motionhatch.com/21, you can see all the links there of the things that we spoke about in the podcast. Just a quick reminder again, if you want to hear about the freelance contract bundle, we're going to be launching it in October. If you go to motionhatch.com/contract, you can find out more and you can sign up. And if you sign up there, you'll get access to all the bonuses that we're going to have on launch week and things like that. So I really want you guys to be involved in that. So head over there and check that out. Thanks so much again for listening. I appreciate you. See ya.